Now on this question we're asked to complete the square and then factor. Now the reason we're asked to factor straight away is because 176 is a pretty big number actually, and trying to find two terms that multiply to make that might be very difficult. And even if we could, we might still not be able to find two numbers then that subtract to make negative 14. So we're going to use a slightly different method. So we're going to complete the square. So I'm going to do half of negative 14 here, which is negative 7. Then if I do 7 squared, that gives me 49. Now I don't want 49, I want negative 176. So I need to subtract 225. It was actually 49 add 176 to give me that 225. Now 225 hopefully you recognise as a perfect square. And the reason that's useful is, notice now I have a term that's squared and another term that's squared, and I'm going to do the difference of those. So I'm actually doing difference of squares. Now before we do that, let's look at a much simpler one. So if I was doing x squared minus 16, which is x squared minus 4 squared, then you do x plus 4, x minus 4. So essentially you do the square root of each term, and then you make sure that one's positive and one's negative. So I'm going to do the same with this one. So when I do the square root, I'm just going to get x minus 7, and I'm going to get 15. And I'll do the same for the other one as well. X minus 7, 15. I'm going to make one positive, and I'm going to make one negative. And then now I can go ahead and work out what these actually are. So negative 7 plus 15 is positive 8, and negative 7 take away 15 is negative 22. So we've managed to factor this, and we can check as well. 8 take away 22 is negative 14, and 8 multiplied by negative 22 is negative 176, but very difficult if we just simply factored. Now 6e asks us to complete the square, so as we have a leading coefficient here, let's take 3 as a common factor here, and then I've got to divide this by 3, so I'm just going to leave that as 2/3, and I'm only going to take a factor on the first two terms. Now I have to do half of this value here, so half of 2/3 is 1/3, and then when I multiply this out here, 1/3 times 1/3 is 1/9, times by 3 is 3/9, so I'm just going to make a little note of that, 3/9 or 1/3. Now I don't want 1/3, I actually want negative 4, so if I subtract 4 and 1/3, then that should work. 1/3 take away 4 and 1/3 is negative 4. This question just asks us to complete the square, and then afterwards it says find an appropriate, the least or greatest value of each of the expressions and when this occurs. Now as this is a positive x cubed, then I know this is a u shape, so we're referring to a minimum for this question because it comes down to a lowest value, and the lowest value from this, looking at these two values here, the least value is negative 4 and 1/3, and that occurs when x equals, do the opposite of this, negative 1/3. Sometimes actually after you complete the square, it's easier just to write down what the vertex is straight away, and then you can interpret what this is asking. So when it's asking for the maximum and minimum, it's referring to the y values. When it's asking where it occurs, then it's referring to the x values.